Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show tonight. Tonight's guest, we have a success story. We have a young man that went into the system. He did a little over 10 years. He came home. He's a successful businessman with his own business, and his business is thriving. And this man was incarcerated. He was a criminal at one time in his life.
Driving?
So,
No, construction.
thriving construction business.
Oh, thank you.
at this time. So we're gonna bring on Tracy Anzari Greenwell, and welcome you to the show. Welcome to the show, my brother.
How you doing, man?
Welcome to the show, and
Thank
welcome home.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
Been
so.
a while. Yes, yes. You went to prison some years ago.
Yes, I was convicted in 1989, and I actually did 13 years in prison for armed robbery.
Okay.
Got mixed up with the wrong crowd. You know what they say, if you lay down with dogs, you're going to get fleas.
Please, eventually.
So, yes, so I ended up being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong crowd.
Okay.
And that ended to my demise, and I ended up doing 13 years in prison.
Now, when you got arrested out of what county?
It's actually Santa Clara County.
Santa Clara County.
Yes.
Okay. And you was arrested. You went to Santa Clara. You went to Redwood City.
No, I went to the Santa Clara County Jail right downtown there.
Okay.
And fought my case for a year.
You thought you was in county jail for a year fighting
Yes.
your case? Okay.
Yeah, fighting my case. And then I ended up, typical black man without a lawyer.
Okay.
Didn't have enough money. And so I had a public defender.
Defender, okay.
And I ended up, like so many black men in the system, I ended up taking a deal.
Right.
And so I took a deal for 25 years, and they were talking about giving me 40 years for multiple counts of armed robbery, accessory.
Mm-hmm.
I was accessory to armed robbery, running around with other people, but still, like I said, you're guilt by association.
Right. So you was actually sentenced to 25 years.
Yes, I was.
Okay, you did a total of 13 years.
I did 13.
That was good behavior.
Yes, with good behavior. Back then,
Right.
they were giving you half time.
Right, exactly. So when you went in the system, and at some time during your incarceration, some kind of bell went off, some kind of light went on, and you said, I got to do something different with my life because this is not working.
Funny you should say that. When I first went in, they had me in some of the most violent prisons, Pelican Bay, Folsom, and then I ended up going down to Calipatria.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, I was just fighting to stay alive.
Right.
And then it wasn't until I got back up north to a place called Coalinga, ironically Pleasant Valley.
Wow.
Was the name of this prison. Not very pleasant, but it was in the valley.
Well, it wasn't pleasant.
And then it was at that moment with about approximately, I would say 6-7 years left of my sentence, that something went off, and I was at first, those first penitentiaries were all maximum security. So it's really just dog-eat-dog world. And I was just trying to stay alive. And then when I got to Pleasant Valley, it was a medium custody prison. So you had a little bit more freedom. And you were able to look and say, hey, you know what? I can. And there is time behind the wall. I mean, after I get out, and I was getting, 7 years is still closer to home than 13 years.
Right.
And so that's when I just said, you know what, something's got to change. And I just now, more than ever, do I need to find a better way.
Right.
And, like people say, there's no atheists in a foxhole.
Right, exactly.
So when you're in trouble and when things don't go, you get down on your knees and you pray to God.
That's right.
That's right.
So you start going to different programs, educating yourself to different things, and you start going to classes to get stuff that you needed. So when you do your transformation back to society, you have something to work with.
Well, yes. Actually, down there in Coalinga, they did have a very good vocational programs. And so I was able to take computer technology. I was able to take office services, and I learned basic accounting. Learned how to use Microsoft Office. I learned how to type 60 words a minute, clerical skills. and all that. And it actually started prepping me for the world outside.
Okay.
And it was funny that once through erudition, I was able to educate myself. I wasn't able to go to college, and I didn't have the money for college. And so through erudition, I educated, did a lot of reading. And that became my savior.
Okay.
And as time went by, people in prison started seeing me at this one specific prison. They saw me as someone that could help the inmate population. So it was kind of amazing what happened to me, but I ended up becoming like the president for the whole institution. So they had this men's advisory council.
You was the president of MAC.
Yes, I was the president of the MAC, and I became the president first for the chairman of the one facility that I was on, Facility C. But then there's like 5 facilities, and then we also had a institutional council, and then I ended up becoming the president for the whole institution.
Okay.
And I used to meet with the warden and her staff on a quarterly basis, and I used to have my own little staff committee. We used to address the issues of the inmate population.
Right.
And that was a very good learning opportunity for me.
That was the start for you.
That was the
the
start.
for you to turn your life around. So you saw some good in that, and you used that to do the complete, I call it metamorphosis, the change.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
So getting close to home, let me back this just a little bit. When did you become interested in Islam?
Well, it was funny. I met, as the president of that institution, the inmates would come to me and say, hey, Mr. Greenwell, Tracy, we need this, we need that. The people want this, inmates want this. So at the time, the white population, the white guys, the white boys, didn't have much for sports, and so they came to me as a group and they wanted volleyball. So I fought, and my job was to fight for all race, creeds, and colors as the president. So I fought for them, and we actually got a regulation sand volleyball pit
Is that right?
installed on the yard, and they got their beach volleyball in the prison.
Okay.
And then the white guys are so grateful to me. They came to me and they wanted to teach me volleyball. So I started learning volleyball myself. And it was as I was the only black man, the black person playing volleyball. Because of course it's so racially segregated in there that, the white boys, they're looking at, well, you got a black man, but I was able to transcend beyond that racism because that racial divide, because I was the president.
Right.
And everyone needed the president.
Right.
And I would cater to everyone. So when the white boys started teaching me volleyball, I started playing.
Right.
And then that opened the door for other white guys, other black guys to start playing. But of course, not all did, just a few esoteric.
Sure.
And one of them was a Muslim.
Okay.
He was from Belize, actually.
Okay.
And they called him British.
Okay.
So he was a Muslim, and he started playing volleyball with me because he saw that and he wanted to get away from all the riffraff. And it was kind of like the volleyball court became like a sanctuary for people that really didn't want drama.
Right.
And so we used it. So then he was a Muslim, and he was my teammate. And one day he was like, hold on, after the end of a set, he was like, hold on a second, I need to go pray. And I just pray, So he was like, hey, watch my back. We still in prison.
Right.
So he did his prayers right there on the yard, right there. And I was just like, and then I went, I said, oh, so you one of those Muslims, huh? One of them Muslims. and I started joking with him. I said, you run around with a bow tie on the streets, selling bean pies? And he says, is that what you think about Islam? Yeah. And he goes, you know what? So many people do not know about the true faith.
That's a fact.
And he says, no, that's not Islam.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah.
He says Islam is about peace.
Right.
Islam is about love for humanity. Yeah. Islam is about love for creation.
Yeah.
And it even says, do not curse the devil worshiper. And as a Muslim, you don't even talk, that meaning you don't talk bad about anybody else's religion,
right.
not even the devil worshiper, because that will cause them to curse God
That's right.
and what you believe. So after that, after playing with him and talking to him, he gave me a basic book to read about Islam. And I was like, wow, you know, that sounds right. You know, why am I, you know, all my life I was raised as a Baptist, and I was always wondering, why are we praying to a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus on the wall?
Right.
You know, that's how I was raised, Southern Baptist. So I guess maybe that's why I rebelled against the church. But when I started studying Islam, it's like there is no face to God.
Right.
The Creator is omnipotent, and he cannot be seen.
That's right.
He, she, however you perceive it. And so one day, it was coming up on Ramadan, and he told me, hey, why don't you come and fast with us during Ramadan? And I'm like, well, I'm not a Muslim. He says, you don't have to be a Muslim to fast. He says, fasting is good for the mind, body, and the soul.
There you go. Yeah.
He says, just come on, just, you know. And so I went. And then I saw the Muslims praying. I saw them with good conduct. I saw how they always greeted each other with this word of salam, which actually means peace. Assalamu alaikum. It means peace. May the peace of God be upon you. And it's a powerful greeting to anybody.
Sure it is. Sure
And so it was amazing. So I went there, and they started to pray for the first time and go through the whole prostration. And
was something to see.
yeah, it's something to see. So when he stood up, I was sitting next to him, and I was like, hey, what do I do? He's like, listen, he goes, you can sit down and just stay there, or stand up next to me, follow along, and just pray.
Right.
Pray to God.
Right.
I asked him, who am I praying to? He goes, you're praying to God.
Right.
And I'm like, who is this Allah? And he says, Allah is just an Arabic word. If you translate it to English, it means God. If you translate it to Spanish, it's Jesus, Elohim,
Right.
Yahweh. It's semantics.
That's right.
It's just a word. And he says the Christians that are Arab say Allah. And so I'm like, oh, so I'm just praying to God.
That's right. That's what it means.
And so I went through the motions, and when I prostrated and put my head on the ground and started praying to God, that's when that bell went off and says, you know what? This is what I need to transform my life to make me a better human being. And that was the beginning of my journey.
So did you take your child in prison?
Yes, I did. I became a Muslim. So I fasted for 30 days, adhered to the fasting. I read the full Quran in 30 days. And then after that, I said, you know what? I want to be just like you guys. I want to have good conduct.
Right.
I want to be good to people. I want to stop smoking, stop drinking, stop all the riffraff.
Right. Right.
You know, I want to be an upstanding citizen, an upstanding human being, period.
Yeah.
And when you fast, it's something about the fast that like purifies you. So through the fast, I started purifying my thoughts. Everything just started like,
Completely different feeling.
it's a completely different feeling.
Yeah.
Eh,
Yes, it is. Yeah. So you got the tools that you needed while you was incarcerated,
I did.
right? And you came home a different Tracy.
Yes.
When you came home, you was Tracy Ansari Greenwell.
Yes,
And you came home a complete different man. And I met you some years later. I met you quite a few years later. And I met you when I was incarcerated. I was in DVI. And when I met you, you came into the system, into the prison, and you was a volunteer.
Yes.
I think you came in during the month of Ramadan.
Yeah.
And you gave a kupa during the month of Ramadan. Matter of fact, you talked to RC. I was a clerk. You talked to RC, and you gave a kupa during the month of Ramadan. And it was something different because we don't get people coming in from outside in the prison.
Especially not ex-felons
Exactly.
that were incarcerated.
Exactly. So for me, that was something for me to see, that how could he come in after doing time in prison into a system where people are incarcerated? How can he do this? So that showed me that, hey, if he can do that, then one day I'm gonna be able to be out there and I'll be able to do that. So you was a kind of like a guide for me right? And you kind of like pulled my bootstrings up a little bit more because that gave me a little more to work forward to, and I made it out. But you're inspiration for a lot because you made it home. You made it home, and what are you doing now?
Well, now I own a construction business.
You own a construction business.
Yes, and I got.
How'd you do that? Because you had to come on and get a job first.
Well, you know what? When I came home, thankfully before I went to prison, I had a trade.
Okay.
I was a glazer, a glass man. I used to install glass for a living.
Okay.
So I had a trade under my belt. So when I came out, I went straight in, went back to that trade, and I went and looking for a job. Now, the funny part of this is I don't know how much time we have, but you got to hear this story. So when I got out, well, while I was in prison, I learned how to compose a proper resume. Now, I was in that vocational class, office services.
Right, right.
I learned how to compose a resume, and I would never forget my instructor told me, I told my instructor, but look at this gap. I had a job before I went to prison, but now I'm in prison. What about this gap in my history? And my instructor told me, well, what have you been doing in prison? Well, I was working as the president of the institution. And before I got to that prison, I used to work in cabinet making in one of the prisons. Before that, I used to work in sign manufacturing in one of the prisons. She says, those are jobs. List your job history and put down what you did. And so I went and composed my resume and I put down on there, you know, work for Ellis & Ellis sign manufacturing. And I listed my jobs out of Folsom, California. And then and then I worked for cabinet manufacturing, and it was in Tehachapi, California. Yeah. I was in Tehachapi prison, and then I worked as I was the president of the Men's Advisory Council for Pleasant Valley State Prison. I was the liaison between inmates and staff, and I put down what I did. I conducted meetings with the warden and her administration and composed meeting agendas and meeting minutes and blah, 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 blah. Listed that down.
And that's what you did.
And that's what I did.
Yeah, yeah.
So so I got this. So the first job, I took my resume and I went to this place, and then I listed my work as a glazer previously. So the first job I get, it was like a little small shop. And they were like, okay, they hired me, no problem. I mean, because I had glass experience and that other experience that I listed was like far and beyond being a glazer.
Right, right.
So, and so they didn't even, it was a small shop and they didn't even, you know, at the time, they wasn't even asking, have you ever been convicted of a felony, right? So they hired me on the spot. I worked there for 2 months and then they fired me because I installed a piece of glass, a windshield in this old lady's car. And after I was done, there was a scratch on it and I felt bad. I was like, oh, and she came to me, oh, thank you, young man. Gave me a tip and I was like, you know, I had to tell her, hey, you know, hold on a second. I went to my boss. I said, there's a scratch on that windshield. It's brand new. I didn't notice it. We need to pull it out and give her a new one. And he was like, no, don't say anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he was like, don't say anything. And so I went back and I'm like conflicted. She was all nice to me and I'm like, that's not the right thing to do. So I told her, I said, look, you can barely see it, but there's a scratch right here. Go in and tell him and he'll either give you a new windshield or give you a discount.
Right, right.
And she did that and they gave her a discount. They called me in and they fired me.
Really? Is that right?
Yeah, for telling, because he told me not to say anything.
Wow.
I said, it's okay. Sure. I didn't really care working for you because those people wouldn't let me go to Friday prayers on Friday anyway.
Okay, you couldn't go to gym.
I couldn't go to gym.
Okay.
So then I said, God, I know you'll provide. So I just started looking for another job. Sure enough, I got another job. This time working for an Iranian who was Muslim, and he would let me go to Friday prayers.
Okay, right in there.
Right in there, boom. Making more money and had a better job.
Okay.
Worked for him for 2 years, didn't like his ethics. So I started looking for another job and found another job in Livermore for this glass company named Bay White Glass. I really love those people.
Okay.
They gave me a job. I worked for like 3 years. And then one day, They were like, called me up. Now this job for Bay White Glass, they gave me my own van, my own credit card for gas. They let me keep my van all through the weekend. They were just lovely people. I loved working for them. And it didn't matter what I did because I'm driving all over the Bay Area replacing glass.
Right.
And they're paying me for it. I'm like, man, this is great.
This is it.
I get to see the Bay Area and get paid.
Right, this is it.
This is it. So one day that's when they had those little Nextel chirp phones. And my boss chirped me and says, hey, Tracy, what's your social security number real quick? I don't want to look back in the files. We got to send you out to the NASA Livermore lab to replace some glass tomorrow. Wow. And they just got to do a quick background check on you. And I was like, I said, you know what? And there was a female and a male owned the company. So Jill was a female, and she was like the owner. She said, I told her, I said, well, Jill, you might not want to submit me for that if they're going to do a background check. And she was like, why? I mean, what, you been to prison or something? And I said, yes. And I heard this long silence. And she goes, I want to talk to you in my office the next morning.
Really? Is that right?
They didn't know that I'd never been in prison. I mean, they looked at my resume and saw all the work history.
Right.
But they didn't ask me, have I been in prison?
Right. They never asked.
They never asked.
Wow.
And it's not something I go around telling.
Right.
So long story short, I go in and she's like, why didn't you ever tell me you've been in prison? And I told her, Jill, you never asked me. And she goes, you know what? I thought you lied on your resume. So now that question, have you ever been convicted of a felony? It's on there, right? At that time, the question didn't used to be there, and then now the question started to show up on resumes. And so she goes, I looked on your resume, your application to see if you lied, and she says, out of 1,000 applications, when they did the changeover, there was only 3 that she found in the stack that didn't have that question. And I got one of the 3 out of 1,000.
Really?
So I didn't have to answer that question.
Wow. Well, you didn't lie. You told
And
the
I didn't
truth.
lie. And then she goes, and then I looked at your resume. She goes, it says here you worked as the president of the men's advisory, this men's council, and you worked for Pleasant Valley State Prison.
I did.
And I says, I did. She goes, so, but you were in prison. I says, I know. I says, that's my job. That's what I did. I just didn't tell you that I was living there too.
Exactly.
I was making 50 cents an hour, and that was my job.
And
then she looked at me and she says, and I told her, I said, Jill, I understand if you need to fire me. I love you guys. I love working here. But I understand if I'm a liability. And then she goes, I knew something was wrong with you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, you would do any job we asked you to do. You would go to anywhere in the Bay Area. When people would complain, you come to work and you never complained. She goes, there was something that had to be wrong with you.
It was something there.
There was something there. It wasn't right. And I said, that's because, Jill, everything was up for me. You gave me a job. You let me explore the Bay Area. You paid me to work. And I love this job. And so I said, what is there to complain about?
Yeah, exactly.
And then she goes, go back to work. She goes, you know I can't fire you. She goes, you're the best worker we have.
Wow, really?
And so, yeah.
Wow.
That,
So you worked there for a period of time, and then you left there, and what did you do there?
and well, after I left there, I got another job working commercial high rise, and we did all the glass for San Jose State University.
Okay.
And then I got injured. And after that injury, I went into home inspections. I became a home inspector. I met some home inspectors, and they took me under their wing, and I started doing home inspections. And then shortly after that, I met a general contractor, because I used to work in construction also before I was in prison. I met a general contractor, and after I did 2 years as a home inspector, the general contractor took me under his wing, and I worked with him for 4 years. And then he told me, you know what, Tracy, I'm getting old. You know how to do this. He goes, take the test, become your own contractor. I will sign off for you. And then that's when I took the test in 2007, got my own license, and started my own construction company.
So you started your own construction business in 2007.
Yes, I did.
And wow. You had been home how long?
I got home January 2002.
2007. So you had been on a few years, took the test, started your own business, and today you're successful. You're doing great.
I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I'm blessed.
You got your own business. You hiring and you're firing and you doing what some people would never do. Okay, a lot of people come home from prison and they get a job and they just go on and work and whatever and that's how it happens. You came home, you worked, and you got your own business.
And you know, recently I've been blessed through a job. I was going for a client. I was doing a kitchen remodel, and they were really lovely Filipino people, and they were all up in my business. They were like, Tracy, why are you a good-looking man like you single? You don't have a wife? I said, look, I'm divorced. I said, I love to have a mate. I want a good mate, but it's hard to find a good woman these days. And they said, you need a good Filipino woman. And I'm like, yeah, right. Okay. Sure enough, this was March of 2016. They ended up hooking me up with their cousin, well, and the mother is actually the mother, her niece, and I ended up with their Filipino cousin, the niece, and we got married in June of this year.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah, so my wife, she's
okay.
Filipino.
Right on. So you're newlywed.
I'm basically a newlywed.
Yeah, that's right on. Right.
Yes.
Well, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
to
appreciate
you and
that.
your mister, congratulations. Yes, yeah.
Thank you, man. She's a wonderful woman. And I must admit, they're right. Filipino women, they're really good women. They stick by your side. She seems to be the one.
Right on.
And, you know, praise, you know, as we say, inshallah, God willing,
Yes.
this is the last marriage I'll ever have.
There you go.
And the last woman I'll ever be with. And
There you go. That's right on. That's right on.
grateful.
Well, I see you're shining, so you're shining for a reason.
in fact, I'm getting ready to go to the Philippines on Christmas Day.
That's right.
They go visit.
That's good. That's right on. Well, we're glad to have you on our show because you're a success story, right? We've had a few on our show that's been success stories, but you are a true success story because you went to, you know, you lived in and I use this expression a lot on the show that you lived in a cesspool at one time in your life. You lived in all kind of stuff that you were doing cesspool. Then you went to hell. You went inside hell and you saw everything in hell that it is to see. You know, you've seen the good, bad, and ugly all the way through.
Yeah.
Right. Then you left from hell, and then you come back to society, and you say, "Well, what are you gonna do with this now that you made it back?" Right. And you went to work, and you made a goal for yourself, and you succeeded. And you're making goals as you go along. You make one goal, and you go on to make another goal, and you've been successful all the way through. So it's not like a person can come home from prison and the person can say, "Well, you can't do it." You can do anything you want to do in this country.
You know what? I hear a lot of guys say, "Oh man, I'm an ex-con. I can't do it." And you know, actually, that when I went back to your prison, when I came in to talk to you guys and visit, the chaplain, Brother Usama, he told me after this, and to this day he reminds me about it, that after the talk. And after I was gone, he heard two guys sitting there talking, and they said, "Man, did you hear that? It can be done.
Yeah, I remember.
You can get out and have a good life. You can be successful." I mean, apparently, you know, I don't see myself as a beacon for anyone, but
Sure you are, definitely.
But you know, I'm just a regular
But see, you
John Doe.
But you're a regular John Doe, everyday guy, okay. But you're one of the unique guys because
Thank you, Wendell.
you come home and you don't just walk the walk, you talk the talk. You do them both, right? You come home and you have a beautiful wife. You're living the American dream. You married the American dream. Because some people come home from prison and you can't do it, right? You come home from prison and you made that out of a lie. You can come home and do anything you want to do.
Yeah,
if you apply yourself and do it.
You can.
And you came home and you applied yourself here in this country and you're doing exactly what you want. You're living the dream that a lot of people will never live. So you can go into incarceration and you can come home and you can be part of the society if you really want to.
Yes, you can.
If you really want to. So with your story is one that has to be told, is being told, and we're gonna put it around the world in the next hour. People are going to be seeing this because we want people to know that, yeah, we can do wrong. Right? We can do wrong. We can do a whole lot of wrong. But at some time in your life, some light going to come on, or something's going to come on and realize that, hey, I got to stop this because this ain't working.
Yeah.
I got to find something that's going to work for me, and I can be part of this life instead of being 6 feet under somebody coming to visit me every now and then.
Or part of the problem.
Or part of the problem, right?
But you know what? I'm just a reflection of my brother.
Yeah, you're right.
Because you're doing it too.
Well, inshallah, we're put here to be of service.
I love seeing you here. Yes. Look at you. You're behind the council and you're interviewing me. So you're a success story too.
Well, inshallah, okay. All praise do that a lot.
It is. All praise be to God, man. I tell you.
So with that, we want to thank you for coming on the show today. We appreciate
Thank you for having me.
We want to bring you back if we can.
Sure.
We want to bring you back so we can have part 2.
Okay.
Okay, we want to bring you back and have a part 2 and show people that life goes on, and it goes on with like the peaches and the cream. You know, we can have the peaches and the cream. We have everything. Sure. We want to bring you back and let people know what you're doing later on.
Okay.
So if you grant us that, we'd be glad to have you back in the studio and allow people to come on and look at you.
If whatever I can do to help.
Yes.
You know, humanity, and that's what it's all about.
That's what it's about.
That's what it's about.
So we want to thank Ansari, Tracy Ansari Greenwell for coming on the show tonight. We appreciate it. We have a success story, and we want people to know that you go into prison one way and you can come out another, or you can come out the same way you went in. It's up to the individual. You know, it's up to the individual to make the change in his life. A lot of people come home and they come home with the same baggage they went in. We want people to go in prison and come out different. That's what we work for. That's what this show is about. The Wendell Elamine James show shows every Saturday night at 7 o'clock on Channel 29. Every other Thursday on Channel 76, we have a live interview. Right now we're doing from San Francisco to Chicago. Chicago haven't had a budget in 3 years. They just signed a budget 2 weeks ago, and they took all programs out of prisons in Illinois. So now we want to see whether they're going to start the shows or the programs back in prison so we can give information to people that's in prison so they can come home different from what they were when they went in. So that's what our show is about, to give information that can help people understand why people do what they do and why people change the way they do. So we want to thank you for watching our show this evening. Tune in to our show, give us some feedback, tell me what you think of the show. So we want to thank you and stay tuned to our show. Thank you and have a good evening. Thank you.